Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering the original Fry Cook and Nightlight, which are two episodes I always think of as being in season 4. Or at least I used to, until I reviewed that whole season, of course. Just goes to show how similar season 4 and season 5 are, especially at the beginning of season 5, but that's a topic for another time. Right now, it's time to focus on another episode that gives us flashbacks out the wazoo, and the first episode to feature Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy that doesn't mention them in the title. And of course, I can't get to that without saying thank you to everyone watching today, and to everyone who likes and comments on my videos. Y'all are very much appreciated. And with that, let's just get right into it. The original Fry Cook is much more of a return to form for season 5, and by that I mean that this season started off with a special that was pretty different from most SpongeBob SquarePants episodes, and so this episode brings us back to our typical 11-minute collection of gags held together by a loose plot. This episode is real interesting when it comes to SpongeBob's character in a way that harks back to episodes like Ripped Pants and Employee of the Month. This episode also does the thing that I've been talking about since season 1 with establishing Mr. Krabs and Squidward as having some kind of friendship or friendly relationship prior to the start of the show. So really, we got some interesting character and character dynamic things happening all around this episode. But that's just looking at this episode from a bird's eye. Let's get into the deep dive. The original Fry Cook starts off perfectly fine, and things get interesting once the plot arrives in the form of a solid gold limo. For some reason, I just love how emphatically Squidward says, "Look!" Even got the animated point and everything. Maybe because it's in sharp contrast to the monotone way he was handling Old Man Walker, I don't know. And then I love how absurdly rich Jim is with all of his solid gold stuff, especially considering that he's still a fry cook as far as we can tell, apron and all. Honestly, I liked Jim as a character in general. His completely boring name in comparison to everyone else's is just very funny to me for whatever reason, and I thought Jim himself was pretty funny, even though he was making some slick comments left and right. I mean, the slick comments were for the most part funny, so I'm letting this pass. I really liked the flashbacks we got of the Krusty Krab in this episode. It's kind of interesting that 2 episodes in a row involved flashbacks and telling stories about the past. The flashback of the classy Krusty Krab was cool and also just absurd, which made it very amusing to me. And then the cut back to the present with SpongeBob laughing along with Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Jim was a good blend of awkward and funny. Remember this, because awkward humor is going to start failing very soon. Anyway, this moment made me think of that one moment in Enemy-in-Law, and by extension Imitation Crabs, that I adore. SpongeBob's inferiority complex, insecurity, and jealousy starts to rear their ugly heads almost immediately, and I can appreciate an episode that gets into the meat of things quickly. I also like the return of the Employee of the Month wall from the eponymous episode and the movie, though that had it in SpongeBob's house. Now, one thing I don't like in this episode is how rude Mr. Krabs is to SpongeBob because it was uncalled for. While the guy is almost never what you'd describe as warm to SpongeBob, especially before season 9B, the whole breaking SpongeBob's awards thing and then making SpongeBob clean it up was not great. And I know that's the point, especially as we reach the end of the episode and it becomes clear why Jim left and why Mr. Krabs likes having SpongeBob around, but it still wasn't pleasant to watch. But I do like that when Mr. Krabs makes a slick comment a little later, SpongeBob actually gets visibly irritated over it. I like when SpongeBob doesn't take disrespect sitting down. But then Mr. Krabs complimenting Squidward over SpongeBob, that was just out of character. I'll chalk it up to Mr. Krabs reminiscing about the days where he, Squidward, and Jim worked together, so Squidward was at the forefront of his complimenting mind. Mr. Krabs and Jim's chat is a little bit of a lull, but I did like Jim's line about having to charge Mr. Krabs for doing any kind of cooking, as he should. Know your worth, Jim. Though Mr. Krabs' laugh went on too long, I feel like that padded out the scene unnecessarily. I have a lot of questions about this episode, though, because haven't we already established that SpongeBob is an expert patty maker? How are Jim's patties that much better than his? Whatever. This show has no continuity, so let me not go down that way. I liked the visuals of SpongeBob going on a Jim patty journey, and then SpongeBob deciding that he wants to learn from Jim was definitely a good direction for this episode to go in, because I couldn't stand any more slick comments and SpongeBob feeling like garbage. Though I didn't really get that much of a reprieve given all the slick comments Jim keeps throwing SpongeBob's way, and I don't like to see SpongeBob begging. I also didn't find this scene to be that amusing or funny, so that's a detractor as well, though Jim's line about groveling did definitely save much of that scene for me, as did SpongeBob's cute little smile at the end. This episode doesn't start getting actually funny until the montage of Jim training SpongeBob with all the little bits and gags, and I liked Jim forcing SpongeBob to break the laws of physics to cook his patty, and the continuous flushing was great, like, you can't just trash it like a normal person. I love how that gag in particular paid off with the toilet being clogged in the end and SpongeBob running out crying, and the reaction from that incidental was hilarious. SpongeBob has some glorious dramatics at the end of this montage, and I love how they're cut short by Squidward. His whole "I've gotta cry too" was pretty funny. And then Squidward's reaction to SpongeBob's assumption was so funny. It's fun to see him be this happy sometimes. SpongeBob writing a resignation letter on toilet paper was great. All of this is just so gloriously dramatic while also being absurd. His face as he put the letter in the envelope was so good and expressive. The scene where Mr. Krabs finds his resignation letter is the perfect blend of emotional and comedic, far more on the comedic side, which works considering the emotional moment we were just put through a minute ago. And this time when Jim and Mr. Krabs share a laugh, I actually started laughing too because Jim's comment was funny. Honestly, Jim was just a very funny character here. Even some of his slick comments get a chuckle out of me. I love the flashback we get of the real life at the Krusty Krab when Jim worked there. The music was a great touch, and I love how we can see an evolution in Squidward retroactively as he's only working at the Krusty Krab until his clarinet career takes off, which we know will never happen. And the way his hair just dissipates is hilarious, and I love all the lingo Jim uses as he tells Mr. Krabs he wants a raise. Mr. Krabs here reminds me a lot of his reaction to SpongeBob in As Seen on TV, which was equally hilarious, and I love how Mr. Krabs is still laughing as we cut back. The ending of this episode is cute as SpongeBob reestablishes his confidence in himself. Poor guy doesn't value his work the way Jim does. Someone needs to teach this little guy a little something about labor unions. The original Fry Cook is an episode I find myself going back and forth on about how I feel about it. On one hand, a large part of this episode just barely breaks the entertaining threshold, and then after that, it's not all that funny. But on the other hand, there are parts of this episode that are really funny and great commentaries. And then on some days, I get far more annoyed by Jim and Mr. Krabs' behaviors than others, so it's hard to figure out where to place this episode. I think high on my good tier fits just fine, which is why I'm giving it a score of 7.9 out of 10. Up next is Nightlight, which, spoiler alert, is a perfectly okay episode. Yeah, it's about to be one of those kinds of episodes. I don't know what to tell you. I will say that I didn't realize this episode was the origin of the "that's horrible" / "that's hilarious" meme, the one where SpongeBob is reading the book, so that's fun. Anyway, this episode's biggest problem is that it's dull with only sporadic bits of true enjoyment. I could leave it at that, but that's not good enough for me, so let's talk about it. So, I wouldn't call the beginning part of this episode particularly entertaining in any way, but I do like how the end of the story being told is that the author of it died, and then I love how Gary is so scared by it that he just falls over. It's so cute that SpongeBob puts Gary in his bed to comfort the both of them. I'll also say that this episode had some cool designs in it as well. Like, I'm talking about all the scary things SpongeBob sees in the dark, like the chair that was horrifying. SpongeBob's continued turning on and off of the lights along with some screams is pretty amusing. Honestly, now that I think about it, this whole beginning scene feels as close to a cold open as we'll get in this show. And then once we get to the Krusty Krab, we pretty much immediately start getting chaos as my mans is afraid of the dark. We also start with a good gross-up of SpongeBob. Anyway, the chaos ensures that this section of the episode wasn't boring. Him being scared of blinking is actually so hilarious to me. Also, the cooler part used to scare me as a kid, because literally what was that? Whose face even was that? And why? And while we're on childhood memories, SpongeBob screaming about the darkness reminds me of something else from my childhood. Those Wishology specials from the Fairly Odd Parents. Y'all remember those? And who's been watching the revival? Haven't gotten into it yet, but I've heard it's good, and I've seen lots of clips of it on Twitter. Anyway, it's after this that I start to feel more conflicted about this episode. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe this. See, I'm of two minds about the whole segment of SpongeBob buying a million nightlights. The parts in Bargain Mart aren't very entertaining to me, particularly when he first goes up in there, but it works with the context of the entire montage, and SpongeBob's continuous discovery of dark places in his house was pretty amusing, even if I am screaming at the screen just for him to close some damn doors. I don't even want to think of what SpongeBob's electric bill by the end of this episode would be. I liked the art of SpongeBob's lit up house, I just think it looks neat. Really, the lighting of all the paintings in this episode is very well done. And also, I have many questions about Patrick having a window, and since I'm already talking about him, I'll admit that at first I questioned Patrick's inclusion in this episode, but later I found him an entertaining addition, such as the part where he's muttering as he goes over to SpongeBob's place all mad that he wasn't invited to the supposed party, and then Patrick moving his whole ass house into SpongeBob's is hilarious. I definitely wasn't expecting all that, well, ignoring the fact that I've seen this episode before, but y'all know what I mean. The sleeping bag bit wasn't as cute as I'd hoped it be, though, and it felt like padding more than anything. Ugh, I hate using that word, padding. It makes me think of early to mid 2010s cartoon reviewers, and that's why I avoid using both that word and filler as much as possible. Anyway, after Patrick's entry into Nightlight, we then move on to Squidward's inevitable inclusion, given where this episode takes place and who's involved. I love how the conditions work just right for his eyes to catch on fire. Man, out of context, that sounds horrible. And then Patrick hiding inside of SpongeBob was hilarious, and I like how in the end Squidward was included, even if just for a minute, because if Patrick's here, might as well make the trio complete. I don't think this episode leans far enough into being dramatic. Like, SpongeBob's fear of the darkness is to the point of sheer absurdity and ridiculousness, and this episode needs to do something more with that. Yes, SpongeBob ended up buying 1,000,000 lights, but we could have had more, I think. I feel like this episode would have worked really well in the season 9B plus era of the show, because I can just imagine how much more visually expressive this episode could have been, with all the gags that could have happened in the complete darkness too. Now that would have been awesome. But that's not what this episode did, so let me go back to talking about the episode as it actually exists. SpongeBob and Patrick getting more lights doesn't actually make sense, considering that SpongeBob suggested that Squidward was right, so that was a little weird, but the part where they get the lights is fine, I suppose. I liked the one gag with Patrick drying out from the bright spotlight, and that pinky sign was pretty funny. Nightlight then hits us with a real plot twist, well, if you ignore the credits at the beginning of the episode at least, with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy appearing out of nowhere. It's been a while since we've seen them, so yeah, I'm rocking with this. And even though Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy aren't characters that I'd call inherently funny, as I've said before, they did have some good bits in this episode. Like, I liked Mermaid Man's line about how hard it is for old people to move. Also, did anyone else notice that Barnacle Boy didn't even say anything until the end of the hero's appearance? And because we haven't had enough of the Batman and Robin callbacks, parodies, and homages, we have the introduction of the Moth, voiced by the one and only Mark Hamill, aka the voice of the Joker in a lot of stuff. I don't feel like looking up what specific properties. Unfortunately, the action scene between Mermaid Man and the Moth is not super entertaining, which I get is the point, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. That's something I say a lot, isn't it? Oh well. Anyway, SpongeBob's part is better, but not by much. I love how the Moth just flies off with SpongeBob's house, though. And I liked how this episode concluded, too. We end with a collection of gorgeous backgrounds, though, as the sun rises on SpongeBob and Patrick. And we get a funny ending for this episode with Patrick breaking a few laws of physics running towards the sun, SpongeBob passing out, and Patrick running around with his ass on fire. One of my favorite episode endings, can't even lie. Nightlight was a perfectly alright episode. I feel bad introducing this last thing at the very end, but there's a general dullness all over this episode that makes me not very engaged with it. Yeah, there's a lot of funny stuff, but this dullness plus the lack of taking advantage of the dramatic plot of this episode takes some points off of it for me. Enough points to drop it in my okay tier, where it comes with a score of 6.7 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I have some, but they aren't very well fleshed out, which I guess is perfect for a closing thought. So, while I was writing the script to my review of the original Fry Cook, I was thinking about SpongeBob's characterization, and how many people, me included, don't like seeing SpongeBob in a negative light. I'd like to think I've gotten better about this, appreciating his negative character traits such as his insecurity and jealousy. I mean, I was okay with it in this episode, but in some episodes I can't take it. See Breath of Fresh Squidward. But there's many reasons why that episode fails and this one succeeds. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Anytime I come across an episode that exhibits some of SpongeBob's negative character traits, I just think about how I get so defensive and aversive of this, because SpongeBob's basically a comfort character for me. And one thing I hate is someone disliking my comfort character, even in-universe. I'm not explaining this very well, and I'm not sure if I feel like adding more to this conversation, at least for right now. I feel like SpongeBob being a comfort character of mine will definitely come up again, and I think it probably adds some important context to my reviews and what things I like and don't like. So maybe it's something for you all to keep in mind, I don't know. And then as for closing thoughts on Nightlight, well, maybe I lied, I can't think of much. I think I saw someone mention the ending to this episode the other day, which is why I thought of how Patrick broke some laws of physics at the end. Honestly, if you really pay attention to my scripts, sometimes you can tell when I've been influenced or inspired by something when writing. Now I'm really just talking nonsense to you guys, aren't I? I'll stop now. And by that, I mean stop this whole video, because I've got no more closing thoughts for y'all. So I'll end things here, and I'll see y'all in the next review.